Dan Goldfield. I've asked this question to a number of people, but I think you may have spent the most time contemplating it of any of my guests, and I'm excited to hear your answer. I'm going to do a thought experiment that you are laying on your proverbial deathbed at 99 years old, and you're looking back over your life. What kind of a life do you hope to be looking back over in that time?
One of great mutual benefit, brother. One of great mutual benefit. I love this phrase, and it was a wonderful teacher named Dorji Zishisal Rinpoche who was asked one time, how can you tell if someone's really enlightened? She said, well, I sense where your question is coming from. There's a lot of charlatans out there. That's kind of the context of the conversation. But she said, actually, it's utterly, utterly simple to tell if someone's truly enlightened. She said, someone who is enlightened is of benefit. And since then, I've taken that as an invitation, a yardstick, a principle, a North Star by which to live. Though interestingly, the time at which I found that teaching was a time at which I still had one foot in trying. So I would catch myself trying to be of benefit. Well, that didn't work very well. What I found was that the more that I relaxed, the more then that natural energy of benefit was able to manifest.
Wow, man. Beautiful answer. It reminds me right away. This may be the soonest I've ever mentioned my guru in a podcast, but I mention him every time. He always uses the phrase being of service, right? And that ties right into the mutual benefit that you were talking about. And it's a tricky thing because when you try to be of service, when you try to be of mutual benefit, there's this energy of neediness. You need to be of service. you
Yeah.
need you need to create mutual benefit, and it's a subtle but profound shift to actually just be full stop of
Mm-hmm.
service.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful way to put it, brother.
right on, man. It's a very concise, beautiful answer, man. And I want to get into the whole story here. I really envision this conversation of being an arc of being a person that is in the struggle of trying to find their way in this lifetime, finding a very clear, undeniable answer, which I know that you have. I've heard you speak enough in
Mm-hmm.
spaces and in interviews to know that you found an undeniable answer. And then the next shift of being of mutual benefit to that answer that you found and sharing it with others, the bodhisattva path, right? Not
Yeah.
just holding on to it for yourself, but being able to share it with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to start at the beginning with a Adyashanti phrase or
Mm-hmm.
idea that he says spirituality is a kind of sickness or disease or dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everybody comes to it out of a certain necessity. They are in dis-ease. They are uncomfortable. They're discontent. They know something's wrong. They feel like they had something maybe in early childhood or maybe even before that. They had
Mm-hmm.
something. They were connected to something, and now they feel disconnected. And spirituality sort of emerges as this discomfort, this disease, and this sort of sickness that you try to cure. And then the search is how we find a way to cure that. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you could go into your story, what's the first thing that comes to mind of when you felt that disease of spirituality pop into your world?
Mm-hmm. I flirted with it many times, brother. There were various influences in my life, various mentors that I had, each with their own kind of wisdom. Um, but to put it bluntly, just not enough to really get me interested.
Mm-hmm.
So the real beginning was 2015, I would say. I followed a chain of events that was begun in utter desperation, looking primarily at some intense physical pain that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
That journey was one of discovering the causes of that pain, the cause being stress, in a word. To deal with that issue, I studied a discipline called Alexander Technique. Familiar with Alexander Technique, Nick?
I've heard of it, but I've never practiced it myself.
Yeah, so it's pretty niche, but it was just what I needed. And I found some very skilled teachers. In order to study that work well, one has to develop mental discipline in a general way. And so as I'm developing that mental discipline, I'm tending to procrastinate less and less.
Hmm.
And one of the things I'd been procrastinating on was listening to more talks by Alan Watts.
My man.
Yeah. So I fell down the Alan rabbit hole. And where in my previous life as a musician, I'd been listening to music on the way to and from shows. Now, over a 6 month stretch, all I was listening to was Alan.
Love it. Been there.
Yeah. Yeah. So my worldview is changing rapidly at this time. I'm dabbling in guided meditations. And then I heard Alan mention this guy, Ram Dass. So I hopped over there for the
My man.
following 6 months, right?
Nice.
And then I was checking out some of those other spiritual celebrities like Adyashanti and a few others. And it was then at the beginning of 2016, April 2016, when I met my first teacher. His name is Dhamarato, and he teaches in the Thai Forest Theravada tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And then things really kicked off. That was when I really got the idea about what a genuine practice looks like, exactly what the problem was that I was trying to solve in terms of its mechanics, and then how to solve it, and then actually started putting one foot in front of the other.
Wow, man. So I resonate so much.
Mm,
I first heard Alan Watts' voice when I was around 11, 12 years old. I live
mm,
in lived in Berkeley,
mm.
California, and they used to play his lectures on public radio. And
Beautiful.
and I've told this story on the podcast before, but just to show the simpatico here, I remember I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult, basically,
Mm,
and both my parents were ministers. And I remember just sitting in church service and just going, something's up here. Like, I don't believe what everyone else says that they're believing about this
mm,
creator and salvation and all of this. It just doesn't feel right. And the
mm.
first time I heard Alan Watts speak, I said, oh, why is not everyone talking about this? This is it.
Yeah,
This is the secret, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I was so young, I didn't even know why, but
yeah.
he's been a voice for more than half of my life that I
Mm,
still to this day will go back to because it's it's not the words, all the
yeah.
great teachers, Alan Watts, Ram Dass, whoever it is, it's not the words, it's what they're pointing to. It's the finger
Mm,
pointing at the moon, right? It's the
mm,
feeling and the peace that it invokes. So to know that you binge listened to Alan Watts for 6 months and Ram Dass
yeah,
for 6 months, I know that stage, and
yeah,
it's a beautiful part of the journey because it's finally getting some clues into that disease. And in your personal example, it was a physical pain, right?
yeah,
It was it
yeah.
was a it was a physiological stress that was inducing it, and you're looking for answers.
Mm,
How do I fix this? And just getting that hint of, man, I feel like this is the direction to follow. Something I always tell to all my friends, or anyone that I'm trying to mentor. If you just get a little hint, when you hear somebody's voice, when you read
mm,
some text, and you get a little hint that may lead you to the answer, follow it, like,
mm,
very,
mm,
very humbly and openly follow it, because you never know where it's going to lead you. And where it led you was to the exact teacher and the exact method that you had needed to find the cure to that
Yeah.
disease. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool,
Deeply
man.
fortunate.
Yeah. So I just because I'm curious, I would love to hear a little more of the details of like, what was it about the practice and the process that really started to create some real healing for you?
Mm. So taking a deep dive into the Buddha Dharma was precisely what I needed at that time. Now, I was reluctant actually to call this teacher. He'd been sent out of the monastery to teach over Skype. And it was through Reddit that I found this teacher. And I said to my fellow Redditor there on the stream entry subreddit, which you may be familiar with.
Mhm.
Yeah. This friend of mine, Noah, said, my teacher's got some spaces. He's up for taking on some more students. He lived as a monk for 8 years, blah, blah, blah. I said, that sounds kind of intense, man. Like, I feel like I need a teacher, but I don't know if I can do that. Like, what we're going to be doing, like reading endless Buddhist scripture and prostrating and doing all of that. He said, it's not like that, dude. It's like talking to your granddad. He said, call him up. So I did. We spoke for 3 hours that first day. We spoke for 3 hours the next day. And, you know, those paradigm shift moments where you feel like everything suddenly starts to make sense.
Yeah.
I've been looking at everything through one lens. And now the profundity of that shift was, well, we're going to take away the lenses.
Mhm.
We're not just looking through another lens. Let's take away the lenses.
Altogether.
Indeed. Right? So I'm like, there was a lot to surrender. There was a lot to surrender.
A lot to let go of.
Indeed. So we took a deep dive into the Buddha Dharma. We established a very flexible interpretation of Anapanasati. We did a lot to dissolve the boundary between meditation and non-meditation from the beginning.
Mhm.
Dhammarato is very keen on that. If there's something good happening when you're sat with your eyes closed, why not have that something good happening when you're on your feet,
Love it.
right?
Yep.
He said, of course, we're not going to be wandering around in deep states of samadhi, but he often liked to point to that sutta in which the Buddha said that first jhana is all that's necessary for awakening. He said, jhanas 2, 3, and 4 are wholesome, but that first jhana is all you really need to do the practice. So that's what we did. We basically set that first jhana as the guiding principle, as the North Star. And then we looked at all of my complaints, all of my insistences. I can't possibly be clear and free and easy all the time. I can't possibly, because this and 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 this. Inwardly, outwardly, whether it's my fault, other people's fault, the world's fault, circumstances, conditions, whatever it is, I would show up to the call and I would bring my complaints and we would pick them apart together and we would apply the Dharma and we would watch them all dissolve. And I would be very insistent with some of them. And Dhammarato was very, very patient with me. And we would just talk around in circles sometimes until I began to see things the way that he saw them.
Yeah, it reminds me of my teacher, who is definitely less traditional. He grew up in Long Island, New York, was a drug and alcohol addict until his 30s.
Mm,
And then the phrase he uses, he was struck sober. Basically, a higher power came in and removed his addiction.
interesting.
And through the 12-step program, he basically was on his way out. He was in and out of rehab and drugs and institutions, and was basically on his way out. The
Mm.
parasite that is addiction was going to kill the host, was going to kill him. And he was struck sober, and through 12 step, he's been sober for like 40 years at this point. And
Wow.
he always says, I haven't had a strong urge to drink or use in 40 years. That
Wow.
has to be a miracle. That can't be something that that his name's Paul, that Paul, the person, could have done. And
Right. Right.
a few years into 12 step, he found Buddhism and like kind of non-duality, Ramana
Mm.
Maharshi and
Mm.
Nisargadatta Maharaj, and he found sort of two ways of framing what he calls the same thing. 12 step recovery and non-duality, broadly speaking, are both pointing to the same thing. And I see your teacher pointing to it too, of all of your objections to why you can't be free here and
Mm.
now. And the way that he frames it is the word but, you
Yeah.
know. He says
Yeah.
he says the suffering begins at but.
Yeah.
I understand this moment is all there really is. I understand that I'm inherently free. I'm already home. I've always been home. I could never not be here and now free. But
I love it, dude.
I
I
don't
love
de-
it.
I don't deserve it because of this, or my parents fucked me up because of this, or if I had more money,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's been my own process too, is just realizing, oh, another phrase from my teacher, it's always available at all times with no
Yeah.
requirements necessary.
Yeah.
We create the requirements to find
Yeah.
peace, right?
Yeah.
We create the requirements to find equanimity. It's inherent, it's prior to all of
Yeah.
our objections.
Yeah.
And so I really loved hearing your share of your own process of getting it and then seeming to lose it because of the objections that we create.
Yeah. And we had great fun with flipping it to see, and it to be fair, I must credit other teachers that I hung out with and listened to after this first teacher of mine, uh, Ziji Rinpoche being one of them, although I never met her, just listened to tons and tons of her recordings, hung out with some of the teachers that she trained. That all important flip, that it's not the peace and freedom that we get the trouble.
Yeah.
That's what we pick up, right?
Yes, the peace and freedom we already have.
Yeah. It feels like from that beginning position, it feels like we pick up the peace and then we
Mhm.
lose it,
Yes.
right?
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the other way around. That flip was so important for me. So important.
Yeah, and I use that flip all the time when it comes to presence, being
Yeah.
present, right? We think, "Oh my god, I'm present." Like, I just picked up presence, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was
Yeah.
totally lost in ruminating on the past and worrying about the future, and then all of a sudden, I was present for a moment, like a happy accident. And another thing my teacher will say all the time is, "You can't be out of the moment."
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't get out. Try. You
Yeah.
can only seem to. You can only buy the illusion that you're actually lost in thoughts of the future, but you can
Yeah.
only do that now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you're so right, man. That flip of realizing we are presence. We can't
Yeah.
be anywhere else.
Yeah.
We are peace and freedom. We pick
Yeah.
up these ideas that make us believe that we're not, but that is the baseline. That's the
Yeah.
inherent state. And it makes it so mind blowing to just go like, oh wow, I'm doing this to myself, right? I've done this to myself from the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it's still a process, right? Even
Yeah.
though you can realize it in the moment, it's like every habit, you have to work it again and again and
Mm.
again.
Mm.
So to that point, how long in linear time, how long of a process was this for you? How long were you working with him before you
Mm.
sort of moved on to the next chapter?
Yeah. So very intensively for a year, then gradually less frequently for 4 years
Hmm.
following.
Wow.
Um, and he'd seen it all play out before. He said to me in our very first call, we'll speak a lot to begin with, and then less and less and less as you gain the understanding yourself. And that's exactly what played out. Yeah, so that was really 1 year very intensively, and then, as I say, less and less over the next 4 years. During that 4 year period, then I picked up other teachings. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, my mother attempted suicide, Nick. That was in 2017. I think towards the end of 2017. And the only way that I could think of to help her was to share with her some of this stuff that I'd been learning.
Yeah.
So I went and stayed with her for 3 nights afterwards and gave her the crash course, and she responded really well. There was still a lot to do, but we covered a lot of ground in those initial 3 or 4 days, which, if you've ever worked with someone, brother, who's in that state of desperation,
Yeah.
you know how open they are,
Yeah.
right?
Vulnerable.
Yeah, when someone's gone to the lengths of taking suicide as an option, then they're going to be open to other options as well.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Getting
Right.
back to the spirituality as a sickness, right?
Yeah.
There's a strong disease in there, and
Hmm.
man, and getting back to being of service and mutual
Hmm.
benefit. I mean, the place that you're coming from for your own mother, the love of, hey, this worked for me. I know it works, and I want
Yeah.
to share it with you. It's really. I'm
Hmm.
sorry to hear. Obviously, I'm sure it was a stressful time, but it's so beautiful that
Yeah.
you found this gift that
Yeah.
you wanted to share with your mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Really beautiful. Really
Yeah.
beautiful. And she and I often remark on that beauty now, and she's very pleased that that actually marked the beginning of my teaching experience. So I
Oh,
spoke with mum then for 6 months afterward daily, and eventually we got her back on her feet.
wow.
And then Damarato said to me, "Okay, you're a teacher now." I said, "Who, me? What, really? Me?"
Bro, talk about a crash course. I mean, your first client's your own mother. It doesn't get much
Yeah,
harder than that.
right? Yeah. Yeah. In real deep despair as well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it was, and it's that call to action,
yeah.
right? That call to be of service was so great. And I'd already been teaching music for almost 20 years at that time, so I was able to articulate ideas. I'd spent a lot of time practicing that. Nonetheless, music is a lot easier to describe than the Dharma. Right?
Yep.
And music's not always the easiest. With the
Hmm.
Dharma, we're really on hard mode, right? So it was incredibly valuable experience.
Wow.
And I was encouraged to teach then by Dhammarato, but I was very reluctant for two reasons. One, I'd seen so many different presentations of wisdom, which at that time, brother, seemed to me to be distinct. And I actually went on to get quite hung up around the differences
Yeah.
between these teachings. Sound familiar?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You got me.
Oh man. And then the second reason was, well, so I wanted to go and explore other teachings, is the kind of end of that piece. But then also I really felt keenly the sense of responsibility that is on one's shoulders when they work with people in this way.
Hmm.
One thing, of course, trying it on for size with your mother,
Yeah.
but talking to strangers. Like, am I going to be talking to strangers who just attempted suicide? Like, that's a lot, man. I'm used to teaching kids how to play drums.
Yeah. Big leap.
Right?
Yes.
Now, Dhammarato is just having a good old laugh about the whole thing at this time. But I decided, given those two reasons, I was going to go and explore some other teachings, see some other presentations of wisdom and how other teachers do it. I felt unsteady about just presenting one flavor of wisdom and saying, this is the way,
Hmm.
do this, do that. do the other. And what I've come to see over time, brother, is I think that this is actually somewhat of a unique predicament that we 21st century practitioners find ourselves in.
Absolutely.
Stood at the spiritual buffet
Yeah.
saying, how do I make a plate of food? Like, this is
Hmm.
where back along there was less on offer.
Yeah.
The further back you wind the clock, the more difficult it was to sample each of these different teachings, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, of course, came the comfort of entering into one system, usually whichever one was in your local area,
Hmm.
right? And so if you were raised as we were in Christian surroundings, you were Christian or you were Catholic, that was pretty much your choice. Maybe there were some other delineations around. Um, but as I understand it, there's often great upset when someone wants to leap from one of those delineations to another.
Yeah.
And it's all quite tight. If you wanted to explore Eastern philosophies, well, I guess you would have gone to the library. You could have read some stuff. And again, depending on, where how far back we look, if you were really crazy, you would have gotten on a boat,
Yeah.
said goodbye to your family, gone on a months long voyage and never seen them again. Right? And by
Yes.
the time you get there, you're damn well gonna be a Buddhist because
Yeah.
you just
You're committed.
yeah, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it all seemed to me contextually there was much more of that, like, this is what we do over here and this is what we do over here. And there was a lot of distance between those where now our context couldn't be more different. You just have to open Reddit and you've got
Yeah. Access to
yeah,
all the wisdom of
yeah,
humanity's
yeah.
history. Yeah.
It's all there, right? So I wanted to cross-reference. Like I say, I was concerned with the differences between the traditions at the time. Something else that I noticed, which you may have come across yourself, brother, was I saw a lot of language in the texts that sounded very certain,
Mm.
things in the flavor of this is the way to the exclusion of all other ways.
Hmm.
Do this, don't do that, right? The classic is if you don't sit like this, you can't get enlightened,
Of course. Yeah.
right? But
Uh-huh.
of course, again, right, you log onto Reddit and you see, well, the Tibetans said this, the Japanese said that, the Thais say this, right?
Hmm.
So I was deeply bothered by that and trying to figure out for the longest time which the way is the way.
Hmm. Capital T,
Yeah.
capital W.
Yeah. And then I started to think, well, okay, what was the context here? Why would someone write in such exclusive language? And I had a vision of a Tibetan monk rocking up in the next village where the locals are sacrificing animals to try to make it rain.
Uh-huh. Not the
So
way.
what's that? Right? Exactly.
Man, we need to use some heavy language here to correct the
Yeah.
course. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome, bro. I
that's
never thought of
yeah.
it in that way.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So that's what got written down, right?
Mhm.
And then here's us in the 21st century going, what? Huh? How do I decipher all of this? Well, the deciphering came for me when I stopped being so concerned about those differences between the teachings and indeed retreated to that position of fingers pointing at the moon. Let's see what the common essence is among these teachings. Let's see, could they all be pointing to the same place?
Yeah.
That's when there was another major shift for me, uh, looking much more into the non-dual practices. Then, of course, there's non-duality to be found in any teaching worth its salt, but those more explicit non-dual teachings I found to be um, enormously liberating.
Yeah.
Where there was a shift then, where I even then finally let go of that disease of spirituality,
Mm.
let go of that practice that I'd cultivated with that first teacher of mine.
Yeah.
In one sense, all he was ever recommending was to surrender. In another sense, there was this flavor of development, of skill, of cultivation, of
Hmm.
effort and achievement. So in the dropping of all of that, things just opened up and there was nothing left to cling on to.
Man, beautiful journey you just took us through. I
Mm,
keep getting reminded of my own teacher.
mm,
He'll often say the goal is to be left with no spirituality,
yeah.
right? You have to use it to
Hmm.
get there, and there's a lot of metaphors for this. You use a boat, to get across the river, and when you
Hmm.
get across the river, you don't pick up the boat and carry it with you.
Yeah.
You're free of the boat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Ramana Maharshi uses the example of if you have a thorn in your arm in your skin, you can use another thorn to get that one out, but you don't
Yeah.
then replace it with a new thorn.
Yeah.
You're empty in the end, right?
Yes.
And so, yes,
Yes.
the spiritual practices, the venue, whichever way that you use, get you, through that dark night, through that disease. But then that last step, and I'm sure you have seen plenty of examples. We have examples in popular culture of people that are still holding on to that boat once they get free, once they get to
Yeah.
the other side. And the most freeing, beautiful place to end up is no boat, no way, right? You're just
Yeah.
here now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really awesome, man. And that speaking of, like, we're here now. You arrived at that place of emptiness. Um, and then for some reason decided to take the bodhisattva way and point others to that
Mm,
same moon that you had
mm,
found. Um, and that's what I'm really interested in, because I've gone through the journey. Maybe I'm in a piece of it right now. I'm reminded of uh, one of my heroes, my good friends that I've had on the podcast twice, Duncan Trussell. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
yeah.
He's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm familiar
yes,
with Duncan. Yeah.
right on. Love Duncan.
Yeah.
And I saw him at a comedy show back in May, and after the show, we were talking outside and I gave him a copy of my teacher's book, right? And he said, "Oh, Paul, how's he doing?" I said, "He's doing great. He's just getting old. He's in his 70s." And he right away goes, "They're all getting old, man." I'll do my Duncan Jones. "Everyone's getting old, man. They're gonna
Good.
die."
It's good.
I've listened to a lot of Duncan, and I've
Yeah.
talked with him a lot. They're all gonna die, man. You know what that means? And he's looking at me all profound. And I'm like, "I think so." He goes, "It means we gotta take over." I said, "It's scary, man." He says, "I know, it's terrifying." And it was a funny moment, but it still sticks with me to this day of like, I feel the calling to
Yeah.
to share just as you do, to teach, to guide, to be of mutual benefit,
Mm,
but I don't know how the hell to do it.
mm,
And I see you're clearly a few steps ahead on this
mm,
journey. So I would love to hear that moment of when, you had found this thing. Can't
mm.
put a word to it. You found the moon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now you made the decision to point to it for others. What was that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. So a piece of the puzzle that we must place here is my darling wife,
Mm,
who studied as a neuropsychologist. And she was really the final piece of that puzzle for me in terms of, okay, I've cross-referenced all of these wonderful spiritual teachings. I feel complete in myself. This wasn't something that I was looking for, but well, I was looking for a partner. So I met my wife and we just compared notes.
mm.
Oddly enough, she's from India, where so much of this began. And she'd been studying the psychology of the West while I was here studying the psychology of the East. So,
Match made in heaven.
just crazy. She arrives in the UK and we met on a dating site and immediately wanted to meet up and have that conversation, even if there was no romantic connection.
Love it.
Fortunately for us, there was, and I count myself among the luckiest men on the planet for finding such a wonderful match for myself across all aspects of life.
Yeah.
Just the mundane stuff as well. We're just super, super compatible. We like things to be kind of the same level of tidiness, for example, just such a mundane thing, but that causes so much issues in so many relationships, right?
Oh, yeah.
We like the same shows, we like the same food, we like the same jokes. We're incredibly lucky.
I love to hear that, man. I got married this year, and I'm in the same boat for the first time in my life. I can relate.
Man, such fortune, hey.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm happy for you too, brother.
Thank you, man.
When I had those notes compared, then I felt, okay, I've got something really robust here. I've cross-referenced my understanding with dozens of different teachings. I've really gone deep. I've spoken with various teachers. I've explored, had conversations with all kinds of peers. Now I have this academic support as well.
Hmm.
And really, then looking back, I saw that what I'd really been doing was kind of whittling down my understanding and teaching to only that which could withstand all angles of attack,
Love it.
right?
Yeah.
Can I simplify this to the point that, not that no one can disagree with it, because people will always find these things and kind of have their opinions on them. Goodness knows there are plenty of people who decry spirituality as a whole.
Hmm.
Really, it was about me feeling that it was robust enough to have that debate with anyone who wanted to have it.
Yeah.
You said earlier, an undeniable answer, right? So beginning from finding that undeniable answer myself to then this important transition that we're approaching now of how do I point? How do I explain this? Can I explain this? How do I represent this? I actually spent a year during one of the COVID lockdowns in relative silence, just sitting with that question.
Wow.
Is this is this impossible to describe adequately? Well, yes, actually, is the answer. So another wonderful quote from Adyashanti that someone else shared with me, actually. I never heard him say this, but someone told me that he said to a crowd one time, when it comes to explaining this stuff, it's my job to fail well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
familiar with that one.
It's impossible, but you can fail well in the attempt of explaining it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it was a Dharma friend who I spoke with throughout that period from one time to another who said, why don't you just go online and start talking about what we talk about? I said, well, I could do that, I guess. I started to feel, isn't it better to try? And if I manage to point for one person who finds that moon, is it not worth it? And I began to feel very much that yes, yes, it's worth it. So following that conversation with that friend, I went home to my flat and a list of topics as long as my arm fell out of me.
Nice.
And that was the very beginning of my new career. I had known that I had known that there was more impact in teaching the Dharma for a long time. I mean, that was undeniable. Ever since it saved my mother's life, I was convinced that there's power here, tremendous power. And I had started to speak with other friends, family members, and before COVID, I'd started to work with just a couple of strangers, maybe more than a couple, thinking back, because I tried to make a donation model work, and people don't understand that in the West, so it didn't work. And then following COVID, oh, well, I'm skipping part of the story here. I put out a bunch of talks on an app called Insight Timer. Are you familiar with Insight Timer, Nick?
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
were
yeah.
talks or guided meditations or both?
Both.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so whatever was kind of on my heart that day, I would either record a practice or record a talk. And the response was wonderful. Lots of people were very kind, and I sensed that there was something there. There was value for
Mm-hmm.
people. Then I'm beginning to look at the mechanics of all of it. COVID's coming to a close, and I'm not sure if you're aware, brother, but Insight Timer pays people who upload teachings
Mm.
much the same as Spotify pays musicians, which is like 0.00 something of a cent
Uh-huh.
per play. So COVID's coming to an end, and I did the numbers, which is rather unlike me, but I wanted to know, like, what am I even aiming for here? I think they were maybe sending me $30 a month or something. I said, what do I need to do here to just get to survival baseline?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would have needed 3 million unique plays a month.
Wow. We're gonna have to find another route.
We're gonna have to find another route. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I ended up going back to teach drums. And then I'm having more and more experiences where I'm giving a drum lesson. And if you've ever known any music teachers, Nick, then you'll know that most students don't practice.
Of course.
Most students come to have something to do after school or on the weekend or after work. And it fills a wonderful space in their life. Music is a lovely thing to do. But what that means for the teacher is often giving the same lesson many times over.
Mm-hmm.
So there I am guiding one youngster or another through that same beginning material for the 12th, 13th, 14th time. Meanwhile, my phone is buzzing in my pocket. And invariably, it would be someone who had a panic attack or just broke up with their partner or just lost a loved one or took too many mushrooms or
Yeah.
and I'm thinking there's two things I could be doing with this moment,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I can't do the other thing because I've been forbidden from involving money in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that forbidding came from that first teacher of mine.
Oh.
As a good Theravadin, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
they they really they have those vows and they take them very seriously. And his argument for why it's best to keep money out of the picture is wonderful if it works, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
Not here in the West in 2024, at least. Ancient India, maybe. Modern Thailand, maybe. Here, people just don't understand it. So I started to encounter things like Sam Harris's model,
Mm-hmm.
or on his Waking Up app. He has that scholarship program where he says, look, if you can't afford this, send us an email
Yep.
and we'll have a conversation and we'll just give you free access for a year. Started to get quite inspired by that kind of thing because the most compelling argument for why we want to keep money out of the picture is, of course, we don't want to limit access to these teachings
Yeah.
for anyone. Then I discover the creator economy
Yep.
and I discover, oh, well, people are giving away 99% of what they know for free anyway.
Yeah.
And then they're just taking that 1% of individuals who really wants to go deep, who really wants to take it seriously, deeper with a personalized service. And that's how they keep the business running. What if I were to do something like that? Could that get me out of the music career and into this thing full time? And would that, here's what it came down to, would that be more or less net benefit for humanity?
Beautiful.
Yeah. And the answer was clear as day. So
Yeah.
then I made peace with the fact that that was going to upset that dear old teacher of mine. And we parted ways at that point, and I remain grateful to him, but we just couldn't see eye to eye on that particular issue. Then came the next great learning curve of my life.
Yeah.
How does social media work? How does online business work? How do I transmit this wisdom not just to one person now? I'm not just talking about explaining to one person, which hard enough.
Yeah.
I'm talking about explaining this in the busy attention marketplace.
Yeah.
How can I do that without losing the integrity or even compromising the integrity of these teachings. And that indeed was a very steep learning curve, but one that I delighted in. So
Yeah.
the transition period between the old career and the new was one of very early mornings and very late nights,
Yeah.
of sneaking in 5 minutes to write a newsletter between drumming students,
Mm.
upsetting some people on the way out of that old career who would have rather I stuck around, and just making my choices and dealing with that and seeing then tremendous benefit unfold. The way in which I've been able to serve people has been almost unbelievable. Though
Yeah.
I know that you understand the power of these teachings, so I know you have a sense of what I'm talking about here, brother, and there is nothing like it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
man. I mean, so the first thing that comes to mind is yes, you're helping people that are having panic attacks, that are having a bad psychedelic trip, dealing with suicidal thoughts, dealing with breakups, heartache, heartbreak. Like that's something that basically everyone can understand. They may not know why these teachings work and how they're able to cure that, but they can see, hey, this person claims it saved them in one of their darkest times. That's just so apparent on a human level.
yeah,
And I know because I've listened to you speak before in this conversation and other places, you're actually giving something even more, there's no word for it, but profound, timeless, and boundless than that as well.
mm, mm, mm,
And I wanted to just commend you in having the courage to see that the modern circumstances are different than that of your teacher, and
yeah,
that for your ability to be of mutual benefit to the most people, to be of service to this teaching, and beyond the teaching, to be of service to us as a collective, mankind, all of us, that you had to find another route, and you found it. And
yeah,
you exponentially expanded that mutual benefit in just a couple of years. I just
mm.
wanted to say, like, good on you, man, for having the courage, for going for it, and for finding it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, man. And so I had an idea of this conversation and sort of the arc of it, and we really hit it. From the beginning, from the disease that you felt and found, how you made it through it, and
Mm,
how you came out the other side a bodhisattva who is sharing those pearls, pointing to that moon for others and helping them
mm.
to find it for themselves. I'm going to close with a couple of the usual questions that I ask all my guests. I'm very excited to hear your answer on. Number one, and this is, I try to ask the biggest question that I possibly can. So it's vague on purpose. This situation we find ourselves in, this experience, this moment, this life, what is it?
It's this.
Best answer yet. Alan Watts would be proud.
You would.
Yeah.
That was the question that I came online asking as a 4-year-old boy.
Well,
Online meaning self-aware,
gotcha. What is this?
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was then those 26 years that followed, and I was just completely bereft of an answer from anyone or anything.
Hmm.
Of course, we all have the answer intuitively at that age. It's contained in the question, but then the world has its way with us as youngsters.
Yeah.
We're helpless, we're defenseless, we're dependent. And so we're forced to bargain with
Mm.
our fledgling insight.
Yeah.
We're forced to obscure the purity of our knowing with thinking.
Yeah.
And it's a great tragedy. we do such damage to our youngsters, such damage. I'm sure the cultures who have these teachings more entwined in the way that they do things at a familial level. I wouldn't be surprised if the way we treat our children looks kind of savage
Yeah.
to those cultures.
Yeah.
It's really quite brutal.
It's sort of the opposite of unconditional love in a lot of ways. So many
Yeah,
people in the West claim that they love their children unconditionally and then put all sorts of conditions on them, both
yeah,
consciously and unconsciously, right?
yeah.
And what you're pointing to, what you knew or had before you asked that question when you came online at 4 years old. What is this? What you
Mm,
had before and you seem to lose for 26 years before finding again, that is unconditional.
yeah,
But we put conditions on having that peace of
yeah,
knowing that this is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of another phrase. This is something my teacher's book is called On Having Never Left. And the whole
Mm,
phrase goes like this: gone, gone, gone through trials and tribulations, finally making it to the other shore, realizing you have never left.
beautiful.
Yeah. That's
Mm,
something I try to remind myself at least once a day is, Nick, you haven't left.
mm,
No
hmm.
matter no matter how much you want to convince yourself, no matter how much others want to convince you, you haven't left. You're here.
Yeah,
You're always going to be here.
yeah, yeah.
Beautiful answer, man. Okay, so loved that, and I'm gonna finish because normally it gets a little heavy. We didn't get too heavy. We did a little bit here and there, but it's been very, very beautiful and light. And I like to finish every podcast with the first word in the title, "Laughing Stoic Buddha." I like to finish with some more laughs.
Mm,
So this is a question that I borrowed from one of my favorite podcasters, Pete Holmes. You Made It Weird. Definitely check him out. Um, he likes to ask his guests at the end, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you about a time you've laughed really hard? Could be when you were a kid, could be something recent, but I want to see tears rolling down your face. I want your abs hurting. Like, tell us a time that you've laughed really, really hard.
yeah, well, it won't invoke that response, I'm afraid, but it's something that I know you'll be fond of yourself, and hopefully our listeners will be familiar with because it's a joyous, joyous thing. Is those moments with a partner, someone you live with, your significant other, it has to be. I've never known it to happen with anyone else, where something happens which no one else would understand, no one else would find funny, and that is precisely what's hilarious about it.
Yes, man, it's your little secret.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And it could be a tiny gesture. It could be the way that you said a word. It could be the way you ate your chicken. Something that no one else would even see,
yeah,
right?
that's what adds to the comedy of it is that no one else will understand it. That makes it that much
Yes,
more funny. Yes.
yes, yes. And it's one of those feedback loops where it's funny because it's not funny, which is
Yeah.
why it's funny. And it's yeah,
And
yeah,
nobody else would get it, which makes it more
yeah,
funny. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
bro, that story right there you told me earlier, you tried to articulate how grateful you are for this relationship, how magically perfect and unbelievable it is. But this is showing and not telling, right? You
Right.
giving that example just
Yes.
showed me the level of
Yes.
love and joy that
Yes.
that you have in your life. I saw a post from you the other day on X of you and your wife, and you said something along the lines of, "I always thought it was weird to be this happy all the time, and then I met a woman that was just as happy all the time as I was,
Yeah.
and we get to be that happy all the time together." Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's beautiful, man.
unbelievable fortune, unfathomable. I have fun with ChatGPT a lot, and I asked it just recently, what are the chances of being born human? And it said something to the effect of, well, it's not that simple, but, and I said, give me a number. And it said 1 in 400 trillion.
Wow.
1 in 400 trillion. Now, it gets even trippier when you add to that, and I didn't actually ask it for numbers on this. Maybe I will. What are the chances of being born human at a time where we have this technology?
Oh yeah.
What are the chances of being born human not only at the same time as the Dharma is available, but comprehending the Dharma?
Yeah.
How rare is that?
Yeah.
We already won.
Yes.
We already won. What
We
what could
hit
you possibly hope to achieve in that context?
yeah. We hit the cosmic jackpot of all jackpots.
Yeah, yeah. And that context does so much for whatever journeys we might make out here in spreading this message, starting these new kinds of businesses that are enabled by this technology. When we have no personal stake
Yeah.
in that stuff. And that's not to say we don't benefit, right? The phrase is mutual benefit for a reason. It's good for everyone involved to benefit. But when we come from a position of we've already won,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's all a celebration.
Bro, I feel it, and as much as I know that I already won, I need people to articulate it as clear and beautiful as you just did to remind myself.
Mm,
You know, I
Well,
as I
well,
mentioned, yeah.
go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
you're going through some stressful family stuff right now, really heavy stuff. And I'm
Heavy,
going, yeah.
heavy, but I wouldn't describe it as stressful,
Mm,
honestly. And I think it's important that we stake those claims, as it were. I think it's important that we demonstrate that it is possible to be in these kinds of circumstances without stress. Now, of course, I'll give the caveat. This is uncles of mine who are unwell, so this isn't people I live with. I
mhm.
see them once every few months. So we're not talking about nuclear family stuff here, but I'm pretty damn confident these days that I could navigate this kind of situation with anyone
Yeah, I think
without
this
that.
is really important actually, man, if you
Yeah,
can dive into it a
yeah,
little more because I think everyone would expect to say, it's heavy and I'm stressed out about it. And I
yeah,
I instantly believed you when you said I wouldn't call it stressful.
yeah, yeah. This is the fruit that we hope our practice will bear, right?
Yeah.
To be able to be in those kinds of contexts, the highest stakes in the human experience, life or death,
Yeah.
and be okay. Not denying the tragedy of it all, not breaking down, certainly, not being pushed around by the situation, so to speak, but also not bypassing,
Mm,
right? That's always a danger for practitioners, intermediate and beyond, I suppose we could say, to swing too far in the direction of emptiness. Well, it's just a human life. So
yeah.
what? It was Ramdas who I first heard say the game is about keeping the heart open and knowing that it's all perfect, just as it is.
Yeah.
Being able to hold those two seemingly contradictory ideas in mind, or simply uh, living absent of any ideas to the contrary,
Yes.
then we're just fine. And we weep when it's time to weep if that comes up, or we don't if we don't. We offer support. We give support when it's taken. We're okay when that support is not taken.
Yeah.
There's always a strange kind of juxtaposition for me in that I'm having these kinds of conversations on a daily basis, really going as deep as one can. And then in various other relationships, people all have their degree of depth to which they want to go.
Hmm.
And it was Ramdas who I first heard say as well that it's not my job to dictate to anyone where they ought to go or how they ought to think or feel or what kind of contemplation they ought to do. That's all for them to decide. The best we can do is make it known that we're available and hold out the hand,
Yeah.
not to force anyone to take it. And so, yeah, it's super fucking trippy though, hanging out with a dying person.
Yeah.
Really trippy and so um, affirming
Mm.
of all of this work that you and I have done, brother. Um, it's the kind of moment that would tend to send someone spiraling into something. Many
Mm.
people will go for distractions. Some people will go for spirituality. Alternate universe Dan, who didn't practice the Dharma, would probably be picking it up right about now.
I bet.
Right?
Be looking for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or he'd be in much worse trouble. Right. Going for that drink or those drugs or something.
Yeah.
Because we all feel that we need something right at a time like that. And so then again, we come back to that same picture of so we grab onto spirituality as if it's a thing.
Mhm.
And then we have that whole journey to go on, which we've kind of illustrated beautifully here. So it's a it's a very interesting time.
Yeah.
Mm,
It reminds me of the phrase, all spiritual practice is preparing for a good death. So
yeah,
how to die well, right?
yeah,
And most people that don't understand, that haven't done the work, will go, well, what's the point of that's one moment in your life you're going to die. I want to live fully every moment. I'll just ignore the fact that I'm going to die, and then when it comes, right? And what something like watching a loved one die, what something like getting sick yourself personally, or having a near death experience will do to you is you'll realize, oh, I'm not ready.
mm,
And when it comes and I'm not ready, it's going to have its way with me. Another
yeah,
example in my life, I'm big on psychedelic mushrooms.
mm,
When if you're not doing the work in your day-to-day sober life to look at your demons and your shadows and the stuff that you're scared of, when you eat the mushroom, it's gonna force you to.
yeah,
It's kind of a vulgar image, but the way that when dogs, take a shit in the house and you put its nose in it to tell it not to do it anymore, I like to
yeah.
say mushrooms stick your nose in your own shit because there's nowhere to run, buddy.
Beautiful. Yes.
And I think death does the same thing. It says,
Yeah.
"Hey, you're naked now. There's
Hmm.
nowhere to run. Here's your stuff, right? Here's the shit. Here's the
Yeah.
demons. Here's the shadows." And so, in spiritual practice, when you do that on your own terms, right, on your own time, and you face it voluntarily, not only will you have a better moment of death, not only will you be more present and loving for the passing of your loved ones, right? But every other moment of your life, you'll be more open because there's not these sandbags of worth of shadows and skeletons in the closet that you're denying.
Yeah.
You faced it, you looked at it, and now you're lighter and freer. And
Yeah.
again, another phrase I say all the time is people say that thinking about the fact that you're going to die is morbid. I think it's the opposite. I think it's the most life affirming thing that you can do. Because when you think about the fact that you will die, when you accept it, you also realize you're not dead in this moment. You're
Mm,
alive
mm,
and you
mm.
get to live however you choose and see best to live right here and right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that came up for me as you were talking, man.
Beautiful. Hard agree.
Right on, man. Right on, man. And it makes me think. I don't know how much time you have. We've already gone a long time and had some technical difficulties. But the last conversation we had, your 50-year plan, right?
Yeah.
Thinking of looking the way that we started this podcast, looking back at your life over your deathbed. I can't tell you enough. I'm gonna just one last bit of praise for you, man. I can't tell you enough how happy I am to know that somebody such as yourself with a big influence, with a lot of followers, a very invested audience, that this is the work that you're doing. This is
Mm,
what you're teaching people. I don't know that there's any more important work at a human level,
mm,
right? At
mm.
what it means to live a good life as a human being in this carnation, to live the most meaningful life possible. I think you're doing the best work that there is out there. So again, man, commendable. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, brother. I feel your gratitude deeply, and we're on the same team out here. And so I know you've said that this is something that you want to expand into, and so I'm here for that. I'm here to help you with that.
Right on, man. Means the world. And let's finish with this. We teased all throughout all the amazing work that you do, both to the masses and to one-on-one with clients. Where can people find you if they want to work with you? Where's the best and quickest way that they can connect?
DanGoldfield.com. That's got links to everything else.
Made it pretty easy, man.
Yeah,
I'll definitely link it in the YouTube video here and all the podcasts. Go check Dan out. If you listen to this whole thing and you don't go click on his website, I'm not sure what to say. I mean, I'm definitely checking it out after this conversation. Brother, this was so much fun. I feel like you got me in my heart and you brought me back to the present in such a beautiful way. You showed me the moon and I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
beautiful. I appreciate you, Nick. Thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a delightful, delightful conversation. I look forward to more.
Me too, buddy. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button. If you want to watch more podcasts like this in the future, subscribe and hit the notification to be notified when they come up. If you want to keep up with me, I am on Twitter now every day at write with a W already. Link to that will be in the description. If you want to check out my writing, I publish a newsletter every Friday through Substack. Link to that will also be in the description. I love you guys, and let's keep doing this together. Peace.